So yeah, talk to us a little bit about Web3 and financial services. Where did the idea for the book come from? Why did you want to write it?
So I mean, I have been working in financial services for a number of years, the intersection of business and really technology. And I worked for HSBC, one of the big banks, for a number of years. And while I was there, I was leading fintech partnerships. So as part of the fintech was really understanding what are the startups and what are the new technologies that they are driving and that they're using. And through conversations, internal conversations, but also external conversations, I kept finding that, you know, it's interesting that you still have a lot of people that don't fully understand what is blockchain, what is Web3. They still think it's just the crypto, it's just the Bitcoin, and they don't really want to talk about it because they have seen all the bad news in the market. So I really wanted to write a book that really just explains in simple terms from a business side, what is Web3, what is this ecosystem, and what are some of the use cases that are being used across the globe, really, and some of the companies and teams and people that are really driving the change. So for the book, I also interviewed a few people that are really active within this space to make sure that it wasn't just my voice, it was what we're seeing within the industry, because we all have our own bias. I mean, I come from traditional finance, so I probably also have the bias of looking into this new technology from a different angle than you would do if you come from the DeFi space. So it's really just a book to really explain some of the use cases, explain some of the companies, what is TradFi, what is DeFi, and really look into the future and saying what are the changes needed for this ecosystem to really thrive and to come out of this just small community that we still have.
And how do you define Web3, and how does a digital pound sort of fit into the Web3 landscape?
Yeah, it's interesting because everyone has different views of what is Web3. And one of the hardest things for the book was saying, what is the title for the book? Because some people think of it as crypto. If you go and speak with banks, they do not touch the crypto world. They would call all their teams digital assets, but digital assets is also just a small component of it. So Web3 for me, it's really the wider ecosystem. It's the DeFi, it's the traditional finance, is the blockchain, the infrastructure, but also how new digital assets are being used from an investment, but also from a payments perspective. And one of the key use cases within this Web3 ecosystem is really the new forms of money. It's interesting, right? I mean, until recently, we would think of money as our notes, as our coins in our pockets, or as the cards, or for us to be paying to pay the digital cards via your phone. But with this new Web3 ecosystem, we now think of payments or even money as even your stablecoins, as Bitcoins in El Salvador, or even potentially some CBDCs. So money is a key part of financial services, is a key part of all the leg of many use cases. And within the book I talk about, there is a whole chapter around, of course, payments, around how it really depends on where you're based, that the use case will be different. So talk, for example, around Argentina and how in Argentina they have such a big inflation problem. They cannot use US dollar because it's not allowed. And for them, they start using stablecoin as a new form of money. And that's something for us sitting here in the UK might seem surprising, but for them, it's one of the key use cases that they have. The other one is, for example, in the Philippines, where they go and they deliver boards, and then they need to send some money home, and they're using, again, stable coins and blockchain to really send the money home, so it's cheaper but also faster. Now we might be thinking, well, there's so much actually already improvement within the fintech space around just remittances and cross-border payments, but the reality is that it's still very inefficient, it still takes a lot of time, and can still be quite costly, especially if you're sending a lot of money across different jurisdictions. And then, of course, as well, the CBDC and the different models, your wholesale, but also your retail CBDC is interesting because I think Anthony was just saying in the talk earlier that it's not because you're going to give them some type of form of money that people are going to use it. They also need to see the value in the use case. And with retail CBDC, there is a few examples where it has been shared, but maybe the people on the streets, they haven't used it. So for example, the Bahamas, they were recently in the news in which they are thinking they might make it mandatory for CBDCs to be used in the Bahamas because the uptake wasn't as they were expecting. But also, it also raised another question, which is the adoption the right way of looking to retail CBDCs, or is it actually we want to get innovation into the payments, and that should be our metric? So there is a lot of different components around the money, around, it really depends of your economical, social environment, but also how developed the financial services industry is in the place that you're in.
Yeah, really interesting. And I was at Digital Currency Conference a few weeks back, and they were talking about use cases of, payment of school dinner money and things like that, just making the whole system as easy as possible for the user, which I think is really interesting from the point of view of anyone who's a parent who's had to deal with multiple different dinner money payment systems, and just how we can find utility, of a digital pound. I think the other bit that's interesting for me is obviously you've come from traditional finance background, you're still in traditional finance. We've got these kind of two different revolutions going on. We've got the crypto world, the kind of whole explosion of DeFi, if you like, the kind of decentralized finance kind of part of it. And then we've also got the upending of traditional finance. So can you just talk a bit about how you see those two worlds converging as this moves forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think DeFi, they have done some really great innovation, but if we are realistic, it's still pretty small because most of the liquidity is still within traditional finance. So I personally, this might be, maybe some people in the audience don't agree with this, but for me, I think you need to have that convergence for DeFi to really be bigger. One of the big components, I think, is that it's still unregulated, and for really traditional finance companies, so banks, for example, to really start using DeFi on a scale, instead, not talking about pilots, but really on a scale, there needs to be some regulation coming into force for them to be allowed or even considering to look into some of these.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the other area of convergence is the convergence of emerging technologies as well. So we're going to come on to AI after lunch. So obviously a big part of Web3 is not just blockchain, not just tokens, but also how that can be combined. A ledger can be the sort of underlying substrate for these things, but then we can use AI to analyze data more effectively, or we can find other kind of ways to combine new technologies to do things we haven't been able to do before. So I'm also interested in the sort of future Web3 world that you see in finance, how you think that will lead to, greater innovation. What are the kind of products and services we might see that we don't have today?
Yeah, I mean, AI will be really, it's really like losing the existing data and really providing all the forward-looking use cases. So we were just talking earlier with Byron as well around, like, imagine that if you just wanted to book your hotel and you give it preferences, it will just do the whole thing for you. It wouldn't just search, but then it will also book the hotel for you. Now, if we have financial services on a single ledger or on a blockchain, then it means that we have more data that we can really be used for forward-looking, interesting data analysis and so on. Within the financial services is also, I mean, the whole concept of AI is super interesting, but also we need to be careful because we cannot as well be suggesting things to the client, so then you also get into that tricky part from regulation, but will definitely enable so many more companies to actually use the data and to start doing much more forward-looking things. One of the key complexities or challenges of the existing financial services is that you have so many different systems, not just within the company, but also if it's a global company, you might have the same system that has different versions in different countries, just because of the way the companies have grown through acquisitions of other companies and so on. So yes, we might think that financial services, there is a lot of data, but that data is not clean. And it's not just in one form, it's not just in one system. So that really doesn't enable us to use it for things like AI. If we move into the blockchain, you have one central ledger, when you have really the data clean and in one set, then you can really use it for some of the AI use cases.
Yeah, I mean, you've clearly amassed a huge amount of material in the course of doing all these interviews. I really encourage people to have a read of the book. If you haven't already got one, Rita's going to be outside just after this signing some books just at the bottom of the stairs there. So thanks very much for coming, and also thanks very much for sticking around with us. Just to sort of conclude, after everything that you heard from all the people that you spoke to, and obviously you amassed a lot of expertise in that process, what's the key thing you want people to take away from the book? What's the sort of key conclusion?
I mean, for me, the key conclusion is this is already happening. I mean, I think sometimes people, they have this sense of, oh, we have been talking about blockchain and nothing is happening. So many things are already happening, but they are slowly happening in the background. Blockchain is not like an AI that one day you're going to see it and you're going to interact with it. It's much more a back-end technology that it's already enabling, and it's changing. I mean, we just talked about changing the way we think about money. That's a really powerful change that is happening. So it's already happening. My suggestion is that get engaged with it, start learning about it, because it will be part of one of the technologies that we'll be using in the future.